And thank you once again for joining us for this special edition on the Wednesday of PM Express. This is made possible by the kindness courtesy of the CDD, the Center for Democratic Development, in the lead up to the elections. They are funding a lot of the great conversations that we need to have, looking at the key issues that are of importance to you. And tonight we're going to be examining something that has become even more important in our day, public safety and security. We're going to be assessing the country's strengths, gaps, and vulnerabilities. And they've been doing some great work in this particular area. Now, the challenges, we know, becoming broader by the day, specifically in the midst of this COVID-19, has exposed a number of lapses, indeed, that we have all seen. The porous borders, coupled with conditions of social and economic marginalization and poverty, raises risk and vulnerabilities in border communities, especially on our northern borders. And we've seen the challenge with many people who have been arrested coming in through unapproved routes. Some of them successfully been arrested, but those are the ones that we managed to arrest. What about those that have managed to get in without being spotted? And this is a very important time to get the country pretty secure. Now, there's also been the proliferation of small arms, something that we've known, and it's related to domestic capacity to manufacture simple weapons. This has been a big threat for a while to our public safety and security, and we wonder where we are with this. And coupled with that is the increasing maritime security threat from piracy in the Gulf of Guinea, and we've seen it in our waters as well, which has become such a big problem now that we are a significant oil-producing country in the sub-region. This is important. Now, this, for me, is the single most important security threat, public safety and security threat right now in this country, going into a major elections. And we're going to be delving into this a bit more. We seem to have stopped talking about this. Last year, it was a major campaign theme for us and for the country. But strangely, with 5 months to go to elections, it's falling off the national agenda. And I wonder, where have all these recruits gone? Have they disappeared? Certainly not. They may be operating. And I'll read to you what CDD had found in a report that they put out that will probably jolt us all into having a real conversation about this as we approach the December 7 elections. Related to that, the subject of law enforcement and other security agencies to the operational and administrative control of political principles, the political interference in our security architecture is a key problem that we've also seen that will become very relevant again as we approach the election. There's so many unresolved grievances from the past incidents, including the 2019 Ayawaso West Wagon constituency by-elections, and the report that was put out, the white paper was put out, that in essence rejected the entire document, made some few concessions. The question really is, even the concessions that were made by the government in the white paper, I doubt, we haven't had an update, I doubt if any has been enforced. And yet, we are approaching an election. It raises all manner of very fundamental public safety questions. A few things that came up. Recommendations and ensuring legislation banning and criminalizing party-linked vigilante groups. This is something that we've seen in the white paper, but also in the report, that in essence have fallen off the national radar. So tonight we're going to assess this. It is such an important conversation that we haven't had in the midst of all the COVID-19 and the political related, election-related stories, but we must have it. Some of these conversations almost fall through the cracks in the midst of some of the things that happen on a daily basis. But this is really what will keep this country together, and it would be a shame not to take a closer look at some of these key issues of the gaps, the strengths, and the vulnerabilities at a time of great peril. And so stay with me. And thanks to the CDD again for making this possible. My guests will join me as we begin to break this down further. Very much for staying with me here on PM Express. My guest tonight is, you know him, Professor Kwesi Eni. He is the Director of Faculty of Academic Affairs and Research at the KIPTC. Thank you, Prof, for your time here on PM Express. Long time no talk. Happy that we could pick your brain again. And also joining me tonight from the CDD is Mr. Abrampa. You know him. He's been on the forefront of dealing with some of the key issues with the CDD. He's a senior programs officer there at the CDD. Paul Kwabena Abrampa, thank you, sir, for joining me. Professor, let me start with you. First, give me what is your own assessment of the public safety and security threats? What are the key public safety and security threats for you within the context of COVID-19, but also 5 months to a major elections? Sorry, Ms. Eni, I think maybe you may have muted your microphone, so we can hear you. Let's try again. Okay, he still can't seem to hear me. Let me see if I can get. I can hear him. Let's see if we can.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you all right. Thank you very much. Yes.
Okay, that's good. Okay, let me start by contextualizing where I'm coming from. I think it's critical and important that people who have something to contribute to epistemic communities bring their knowledge and their expertise and the networks that they have to bear on the processes and the mechanisms through which policies are designed and eventually implemented when people get the opportunity to become implementers. The question that you asked about Ghana's public safety and security, I think over the time, let's say the last 15, 20 years, it has ebbed and flowed. Particular issues come to the fore. There's a lot of public conversation about it. It ebbs. Another topic comes to the fore. But there are two things that I think we need to look at. One are what I term as the old insecurities that have meshed with new threats and transformed into ways that are posing challenges both to the operational response or the operational responses, but also to the policy understandings and how to respond. What are the old ones? It's the old boogie of small arms flows and light weapons, environmental degradation, land, chieftaincy, sprawling urban spaces, unplanned, demographic booms. The new ones being a fascinating rhetoric and discourse about creating a hope, albeit threatening to the state for those who feel excluded. So we are looking at new forms of extremism, of violence, and of threatening the very, composition of the state. Now, this transmutates into fairly new, equally devastating challenges as to how the state must respond to this. And some of them are fairly new. Ebola came. Luckily enough, we were not part of it. We actually became part of the infrastructure to responding to Ebola. We are now seeing the COVID-19. And what makes COVID-19 challenging and fascinating is that those who should be protecting the citizenry themselves, first, are untrained to respond to that challenge, and secondly, are as equally afraid as all of us taking part in this conversation. That places all of us in a rather uncomfortable position to say, how do we best understand this challenge, and how do we respond or design policy responses in a manner that is inclusive, that is respectful, but also creates opportunities for multiple stakeholders who are also affected to bring their knowledge to bear. So what we are seeing is not just about old and new threats coming together, but we are seeing new ways or new threats, and we need new forms of responses. Finally, Evans, that there are a couple of things also that pose challenges to us that we routinely just mention but don't place emphasis on. And I'm very concerned about road traffic accidents. You know, when we go to war, people presuppose that the essence of war is to kill your enemy. Actually, that is not it. It's to hurt your enemy. Because when you kill somebody, the person just goes off and dies. When you hurt one person, it takes 7 to 8 people to look after that person. And I'm relating this to road traffic accidents. Okay, if you look at the sheer number of Ghanaian lives lost, the loss to education, investment, development. Okay, this is something that we need to begin to look at and to say, how do we also tackle an issue that on the surface is not a threat to our national survival, but in the medium to long term begins to threaten our very survival.
Okay, great. I guess laying out the issues for me. So these are yours. So you're looking at road accidents, of course, the COVID-19, general health challenges. You've talked about small arms as your key public safety and security threats. Let me bring in Mr. Brampa. Mr. Brampa, what are yours? Dr. Henning has laid out his. What for you are the key public safety and security threats of our time right now? Mr. Brampa, you may have also muted your microphone. You want to activate your microphone so we could hear you. We also joined
yes, I think you can hear me now.
Yeah, I can hear you now. We're also joined by Albert Young. He's a national network coordinator for the West African Network for Peace Building Ghana, will also join us tonight. Yes, Mr. Brampa, you're making your point.
Sure. Good evening, Evans. Let me say good evening to my co-discussants, Dr. Henning and Albert, and also our listeners. Yes, Dr. Henning seemed to have summarized the whole thing that capture our analysis today. I always say that we always face security threats, and but I always also say that the period at which certain threats happen matter as to what we need to tackle and how we need to prepare. We are in elections, and the synopsis Dr. Annie gave us, you could see some of these things, the old and current threats have been there, have been with us, but we are getting so much concern and people are becoming apprehensive also because of the addition of the season in which we find ourselves. Because don't forget, peace and security becomes threatened when people capitalize on seasonal opportunities to act. And therefore, the old threats are there. We are dealing with internal threats. We are also now confronted with regional problems of violent extremism that is gradually getting into the coastal West Africa, of which because of the porousness of our border, we also have to add that in discussions of every security issues that we tackle. One thing that I also add initially that's going forward we need to tackle is the lingering unresolved issues in the country and going into 2020 and what they pose to us. You not long ago we heard of the Homeland Security Group, Study Group, and the Volta region that attempted a secession attempt. That issue is there. We don't know how far it's gone. I don't know, and I don't think we've done enough study into the actual thinking of the people. We've also not done enough as to the recurrent vigilante activities that we have in the country, coming from Atiwa, coming from Wasamenfi West, coming from Tripoli, and the last one happening at Ayawaso, West Wogon. My concern in there is that even though we've made certain attempts, 3 basic attempts have been made, none of these attempts have been implemented, or we are making any effort to implement them. I'm talking about the coming into force of Act 999, the Vigilante and Related Offences Act, that have specific provision as to the fact that as soon as that act comes into force, no vigilante groups, especially those that were mentioned in the schedule, should be disbanded and report to that, sent to the Attorney General's office. I don't think I've heard any of such actions being taken. We are aware of Justice Emilio's committee reports that has come out, and also it makes specific provisions in the report, especially compensation for the affected people. I haven't heard anything. As I said, people who are aggrieved will also capitalize on that to revenge. Nothing of that sort has been said. The president tasked the NDs and the MPP to meet and think of ways of disbanding their vigilante groups on the moral aspects. Fortunately for us, we had a National Peace Council that has been constituted by Act 818 that facilitated the discussions. We also don't know the end of that discussion. So you have a group of isolated cases that we need to tackle. And because we are in a bad season, we need to have a
I think we've lost his sound to us. We'll try and rectify that.
All right, you got me now?
Yes, I have you now. Yes, you're wrapping up with that point.
Yes, I was saying I have not mentioned the issue between the Fulani herdsmen and farmer because the attempt was made by the National Security Ministry to have a ranch in order to solve that. But our desk report from CDD also have the issues going up and down depending on the season that we are in. So in summary, in my initial comments, these are the issues that we need to talk of. You mentioned small arms circulation that has shot up. The first survey that the Small Arms Commission did in 2004, we had around 230,000 small arms in circulations in adult civilian hands. In the 2014 one, it has shot up to almost 2.4 million in the country. From 2014 to date, we don't know how much increase we have had. So there are initial comments I've made that we need to alert ourselves going into 2020 elections.
Albert Young is joining us with the network coordinator with the West African Network for Peace Building. Is he on? Okay, we'll get him to join us. But gentlemen, I want to focus on, you've laid it out for me, but because of the timing with 5 months to go before major elections, I want to touch on something that Ms. Abrampa said, and let's expand on that a bit more. Dr. Henning, you were before the Ayawaso West Wogon Commission of Inquiry. Now, that particular commission was supposed to deal with one of the biggest threats, and Ms. Abrampa had just articulated that. Vigilantism and thuggery and violence in our elections. White paper was issued. The white paper, in essence, sort of rejected almost all of the recommendations that were made. In fact, even those that the white paper accepted, we can't say for any great certainty that even those have been implemented. Then we had a law that was passed, and the law had timelines for implementation to kicking. Again, the question we're asking again tonight is whether even those clauses, as in the disbandment and the register of the disbanded groups, have that even been created, is a key outstanding question that hasn't been followed up on. And then there's a third great unknown, which is the issue that, again, Ms. Abrampa touched on when it comes to this. It has to do with the Peace Council's own initiative, which is still outstanding. It hasn't brought any clear resolution yet. There's a roadmap that hasn't been signed on. And yet, we have 5 months to an election. What is the risk there, Professor Aini, with this whole attempt to deal with this fundamental problem, still clearly unresolved, approaching a major elections? Already we are hearing threats of violence already. What's your concern there?
Well, I believe there's no real surprise here. Let me give you a little bit to the history of white papers in this country as a response to commissions of inquiry, and all those things. Commissions of inquiry historically in Ghana have been used as a funnel to release pressure and tensions in society whenever there has been a crisis of some sort. No post-independence government has had any interest in bringing out a white paper that it continues to implement the recommendations inherent in the white paper. So if you see the white paper on police reform, the Archer Commission report, for example, and the white paper that came out of it, if 1/10 of the recommendations in that white paper had been implemented, we would have had a totally different type of policing and police service in this country. So I don't think historically there is any diversion or divergent approach in terms of how the white paper responding to the short commission report has panned out. So there will be no change there. Number two relates to the law on disbandment. Once more, the law on disbandment, and I think Abrompar and I served as part of the technical expert group. I think he was on the secretariat. I was part of the external experts. Part of that law basically was to signal a political desire to bring about change. But one is the difference between the rhetoric of change and the implementation and the drive to fulfill that change. That's number one. Number two, if you look at the nature and the language of that law, the law was dead on arrival precisely because it did not capture the dynamics and the transformation in the vigilante challenge. The vigilante challenge is from serial killers to foot soldiers to vigilantes to what the short commission report described as militias that the white paper rejected, that particular terminology. But I think from foot soldiers to militias also does not seem to recognize the transformation and the franchising that is taking place. So what we are going to see between now and December is a different type of politically related violence. Okay? Of a way in which violence, as I've argued before, becomes a currency and is franchised and is sold to the highest bidder. Yet another change that we are beginning to see is that those who establish the vigilantes themselves are now beginning to become victims.
Yeah.
In all other political dispensations, when you raise your hands against symbols of the state, a minister, the judiciary, appointees of the executive, it is not the police service or the police force that fights you. It is elevated to an existential threat and extraordinary political measures. Normally, the armed forces are brought in to crush that problem. But we see in this country that the narrative about vigilantes as a threat, as a canker, and you see from the national security itself, NCCE, the Peace Council, the political parties, all talking in ways that shows the canker that has become the political vigilantes. Going back to Mr. Abrompe's point, knowing where we are located and knowing the gradual lack of control over these armed groups, there's absolutely no doubt in my mind that were we to scratch the surface, we will see networks crossing the boundaries and sharing information with even more dangerous groups than the vigilantes themselves. And here lies the dilemma that the National Peace Council's remit. And when you engage in peacemaking, the peacemaker has the authority to lay down the rules of the game. The negotiator of that peace process is the one who says, I am calling you to the table. And this time round, it is the political parties who either chose to come or not come. The Peace Council used its moral authority and moral suasion. Now, in situations where the interests and the forces and the power that is driving the parties to the conflict goes beyond moral suasion, then the Peace Council needs extraordinary measures and capacities to be able to determine that we are moving from a zero-sum game of attacking each other to a win-win situation. And that is why the roadmap, the code of conduct, fantastic documents that are not just about signing a piece of paper, but looks at the gamut of institutional failures and the need for particular types of interventions, job creation, protecting certain public offices, so that people can deliver the services for which our taxpayers' money pay them for, have not been, because the council cannot order them to comply with the signing. And because both parties are not interested truly in disbanding, it's become a long, drawn-out affair. Final point. Were they to sign, who holds them to account? Okay? Peace agreements and peace accords.
Well, we've lost the sound again. We'll try and rectify that. But quickly, Mr. Bramper, there's something in the CDD document that we need to get to the bottom of as we get Professor Inning's sound fixed. And it talks about vigilantism in a way that I guess, as we've forgotten about it, but talks about transformation of it. It says it's an age-old monstrosity in Ghana's political life. Is transforming into more organized, focused, and driven force led by the imperatives of the market. It appears to me from this CDD paper that the thing that we haven't talked about this year seemed to have transformed into something more sinister. It appears to me we are almost sitting on a time bomb ticking, waiting to explode come December. You agree? Mr. Brampo, you've
peace theory.
Okay, we can hear you.
I'm on.
Yes.
In theory of peace, you see that the perpetrators of violence are so dynamic as law enforcers try to fashion out ways of dealing with them. They also seem like so dynamic that they change their ways. So it's difficult to always track them using the same strategy and approach. And the paper traced the genesis of vigilante activities of vigilantism. And we sort of have concluded that it is not an issue of today. In fact, vigilantism has been with us over the years. And even in the pre-colonial era, we had vigilantism. In the military era, we had vigilantism. But as the paper sought to say, and most of the papers that Dr. Eni has written, our election-related violence papers that we've monitored around our elections in 2012 seek to have a different dimension that Prof. Eni hinted on. It becomes a trade, a business that people are ready to enter and offer their services to the highest bidder. So you could see same faces who were previously fighting for an MP or a candidate in one political party. You will not be surprised to see them in opposition camp the next time that it comes. You will see same faces that were fighting in a Tiwa by-election. You go to Tripoli, you meet them. You go to Asawasi, you meet them. So the papers have to say that now the kind of vigilantes that we have, and apart from the youth groups that we said normally indulge in vigilantes because they feel their political parties or candidates' interests are being trampled upon, but we also have a group of people who have trained themselves and are ready to support and give their services to whoever has the highest currency to purchase their services.
Are these groups
changing?
Are these groups, and as they change their face and transform, are these groups as active as they were in the past, such as last year when there were a lot of reports about the activity 2017 all the way to 2019? Are they still active and possibly operating in the shadows?
You have to ask the question: did we do anything? Have we done anything as to the few groups that we even had in the previous elections to disband them?
So what does a reset? I mean, part of what research is important for is also help you to predict what might happen so you can plan for it. What does a research say from the research you've seen? What does it suggest might happen if we don't do something urgently about this between now and December?
Evans is dangerous, and you could see some of the actions that are coming up, even within intra-party contests and the threats that are coming up, political party office being benched down and other things. It's dangerous, and what we foresee, and in fact, we did another research just last year together with UNDP just to update the records of vigilante report that we had. And some of the field secret questions and the answers that were coming is that people feel that the laws that have come up, if they are not enforced, it's not going to end anything. And even if they are going to be enforced, they will have to have a structure of enforcing them. Because there was somebody saying that if you talk of invisible groups, it was a name and a t-shirt. So, but if I change my name, I change my t-shirt. Do the people who were in those groups are also going to be chased? So it's a whole dynamic, and because of the utterances that we are having from our political leadership, don't forget, some of our followers of political parties, they take the words from their leaders as the gospel truth and they act upon them. So now that we are having a tension political atmosphere and we have not had any historical structures of dealing with the old and unresolved cases, I don't think there's nothing new that we are going to see. We're even going to see more and more of these groups. Okay,
I want to bring in Abagin, and as we switch the conversation to another of the big ticket items in public safety and security. Mr. Yao Yang, you have quite a focus on what in the northern territories, if I may call it so. I want you to give me your assessment of one key threat that both Professor Eni and Mr. Brampa had talked about, which is the porous borders and this incessant challenge with small arms and arms trafficking flooding into the north. Is that how real is that threat today still? Both the challenge with the porous borders and the challenge with the arms flooding in from the other neighboring countries into these northern parts of the country.
Yeah, thank you very much, Evans. I think that over the years we have been working and trying to address the challenge, of the manufacture and movement of small arms and light weapons, and even improvised electronic devices, explosive devices. And I don't think that we have had sustained strategies and programs to address this challenge. And again, in terms of our border controls, I am not sure how much effort we have put in place. To the extent that when there are issues in Burkina Faso, for instance, we have people moving into the country, and only then are we able to find out who and who have moved into the country, and some of them are high-profile human beings, that were located, identified by state agencies. So there is already that challenge, and you would imagine that several people move into the country and conduct businesses and return sometimes without being checked or known what they have come into. So in terms of immigration data, already there is something that we need to, that is one of the things we need to pay particular attention to. Then in view of the fact that you have said that our borders are not so controlled, even at the moment that we have patrols going on in view of the expansion of extremism towards the north of Ghana, there are still borders of routes that are not manned, and people still commune. In fact, some people have their farms either in Ghana or...
I think we've lost him there because of the connection. I want to take a break. When I return, we'll look at the challenge with almost all the public safety and security issues that we've identified has old as Adam when it comes to this country. So why have we failed to make a difference there? And what new approaches must we adopt to address them? Stay with me. Express. My guest tonight, Professor Kwesi Ening. He is Director of Faculty of Academic Affairs and Research at the Kofi Annan International Peacekeeping Training Center. Paul Kwabena Brampa is with the CDD, he's a Senior Programs Officer there. And Abba Yayan is a National Network Coordinator of the West Africa Network for Peace Building, Ghana. Mr. Yayan, you were painting a picture of me of failed interventions. We're dealing with the porous borders and also complementing or creating, I guess, a system that allows for, a lot of trafficking of small arms and sometimes proper arms into the parts of the country. I wonder, though, and I've seen this trend with all the key public safety issues we've talked about tonight, that the interventions haven't really worked. In respect of those two key issues for you in the North, why have the interventions failed, and what new approaches could work?
I think that we need to expand, the strategies to include the communities themselves that are along the borders, and to be able to adopt what I would think soft approaches, to identifying those who are involved and noting the chain, the supply chain of the arms, to be able to, design strategies that are sustainable, that are involving the people who matter along the communities. You can, a network of people, informants, to be able to, give enough information to those who matter to respond appropriately. And let's look at it also as an economic issue. That why would people go into this? Look at the business of it, of trafficking in arms. To be able to say what are the alternatives that are available. I remember that in some time ago, there was this program, in the Upper East, and it turned out that what was offered, people were even seeing it to be more juicy, and enable them to acquire more. So should we not design programs that tend to offer some kind of incentives to the people to enable them to, channel their energies towards more productive and other economic, ventures that can still give them some money. So awareness raising is also very important, for them to be able to know the dangers involved in engaging in such trade. But let's not forget that there are some people, whether we like it or not, they would always want to trade inside things. That is their business. It has become a culture for them, So if we build a network of informants along the communities, and in communities that we have realized that there is that production, can we track, work with them to see who are involved? Some of them are passed on from generation to generation, and others who see it as very lucrative, they get involved. So if we don't have, some can be, you redirect their energy stores, craft. And if some of them can be useful in industries, we can do that. Identify industries that their energies and their skills can be made use of, so that they are not engaging in such ventures in a very sustainable manner. And as indicated, if you along all the borders, if we identify communities and that are seen to be porous, that are not manned, as we all observe that, and you put in place informants,
Okay, so this is more to
agencies with communities.
This is more to intelligence-led policing and security. I want to bring in Professor Ining on this. Prof, I mean, we talk about porous borders. I'm moving to this age-old public health and security threat of terrorism within the sub-regional context, right? We talk a lot about terrorism, and we have evidence of many Ghanaians who have been recruited into ISIS, etc. With our borders being that porous, it fascinates me that we haven't had any terrorist attack locally, although Burkina Faso, right next to us, and the other countries in the sub-region have for years been experiencing the challenge of terrorism. It begs the question. We must certainly be doing something right? So that could only be the explanation for why we've almost become an island when it comes to the experience of what terrorism really looks like, in spite of all the challenges we have at our borders and the flooding of arms. And I've read your papers that show that Ghana is almost like a transit point for trafficking of arms, and yet we have enough victims of terrorism. We must be doing something right. Dr. Ining, if you can kindly unmute if you muted your microphone, I think. Okay, I don't think he has. Well, he can't hear him. Let's see if we could, Mr. Brampa, can you hear me? Hello, Mr. Brampa, can you hear me?
Yes, Evans, I can hear you.
If you could take that question for me as we try and see if we could get Professor Ining's sound fixes also. What's your take on that? We must be doing something right. If we are doing something right, what must we reinforce then?
Well, thank you very much, Evans. Albert is sort of have captured the usual problem that we have. What we have in Ghana in dealing with security threats has been just supporting the supply side agencies. So when you pick the 2019 budget, we have so much allocations for providing logistics, accommodation, training for the security agencies. But don't let's forget that security is a mutual responsibility. So in building the capacity and strengthening the supply side, the security agencies themselves, we need to also look at the consciousness of the citizenry to support any intervention efforts in dealing with security threats. That's where Albert is coming from. And it's so serious at the border communities. In fact, I had opportunity to have my national service at SIA, which is the border community. Even as when you go there, it will be very difficult for you to know who is a Ghanaian or who is a Togolese. Because most of the people from the other side of the border were in my school. I was teaching them. When you cross the border, Ghanaians have their farms in Côte d'Ivoire and the Togolese land, and Togolese people also have their farms on our land. So it's crossing becomes easy, and also there were so many routes that we can pass. In fact, I entered Togo from 7 different routes when I was there for the 10 months service. So it's a bit difficult, and they speak almost the same language. So what we need to do there, as Albert was coming up from, is a need to involve the community, build a certain level of consciousness.
But I wonder, Mr. Brampa, aren't we already doing that? And isn't that a reason why we seem to have that great success in warding off the threats that all our neighbors seem to be focusing? We seem to be an island when it comes to the threats, the real experiencing.
We've not been faced with the threats. Frankly speaking,
that's my question. We haven't been faced with the threat.
We've not been faced with the threat.
No, I agree with you. We haven't been faced with the threat. Isn't that because we are doing something right in spite of all the challenges that we have at the borders?
We haven't done anything right there. Yes, there have been attempts, but we are not getting anything right there. Okay. Don't forget, people at the border communities, trans-border business is their survivor. Where I was having my national service, in the afternoon from morning to the evening, you see all the guys moving around. At the night, you don't see anybody. That's what Albert was saying is a culture. It's something that they were brought. They don't know farming. They don't know anything. Trans-border business is their culture. The problem is that because most of them do it and they grow old, now they relax and become assistant to people who want to do it. And that is where the problem is, because they don't have the capacity and the ability to scrutinize who they are supporting. So if we don't begin to build a certain level of consciousness, the information minister, Honorable Oponkroma, said something that some people were arrested at the border community in the midst of the COVID-19, and they were able to arrest them because they had information from the people. And he went on to say that because they now realize that COVID-19 is threatening their life, they gave them out. It means that if we do a bit more and raise their consciousness, they will support the security agency to do that.
Forgive me,
it becomes a conflict between them and the security agency if they try to enforce, because they think they are trying to prevent their source of livelihood.
Let me bring in Professor Ining on this.
That we need to deal with.
Yes, Professor Ining, we lost you earlier. What's your take on this? Is it by sheer lack, or let me bring something right? What we need to reinforce?
Well, I mean, there's certain two-sidedness to this. One is that we've got a multiplicity of institutions in this country, security, stroke intelligence institutions, that, function fairly well. The second is that over time, we've become a part of the infrastructure for the violence that we see. Albert spoke about IEDs. We've almost become a net supplier of electronic components, ammonium nitrate, to those who want to perform or manufacture IEDs, because the security at a number of our mines, the storage facilities, are so weak. I think this year and last year alone, from around June, 4 or 5 mine stores have been broken into, and quite a number of these things stolen. I mean, this is international news. Reuters has written about it. I've interviewed a journalist who has done this. I think there are 2 Chinese mines in the north that have had particularly difficult problems. Now, when you are perceived as part of the critical infrastructure that enables people's businesses to run, that is the violence as a business, you will not attack the source where you get your materials from. Last year, I traveled from Hamle all the way down to Elubo, and I drew maps, and I pinpointed with GPS, the border areas where transactions were done. 86 border areas, crossings without a single soul. I saw official border posts where businesses were also being done between officially uniformed people and the people that Mr. Abrampa is talking about. So it is not just about getting something right. There's a certain level of disturbing collusion that enables the criminality to go on.
Well, what new approaches will you recommend as we wrap up in 2 minutes? What new approach will you recommend?
Well, I think it's about hybridity. It's about hybrid forms of security, justice, and peace provision. Bringing in multiple stakeholders in which the state respects and recognizes their local knowledge and saying, how do you help us? How do we build trust and build respect so that people will see themselves as an integral part of the state of Ghana and therefore interested in building, protecting, and strengthening their state.
Okay. I'm grateful, gentlemen. Professor Kwesi Ening, Paul Abrampa, and Albert King, and enjoy the rest of your evening.